The slap lands before Zara even sees the hand move. 1 second she is standing in the doorway of the master bedroom, a freshly pressed shirt folded over her forearm, the scent of fabric softener still rising off it. The next, her face is on fire, and she is staggering into the doorframe, the shirt falling in slow white surrender to the marble floor. The room goes silent. Not quiet. Silent. The way a room goes silent when something irreversible has just happened. Mrs. Kang stands 3 feet away with her hand still raised, rings catching the morning light, chest heaving beneath her cream silk blouse. Her eyes are 2 dark stones. She is beautiful the way certain dangerous things are beautiful. The kind of beauty that has always been used as a weapon and knows it. Zara does not cry. She does not flinch a second time. She straightens, slowly, and meets Mrs. Kang's gaze across the space between them. Something moves in Mrs. Kang's expression. Something that isn't quite regret, but might be the shape regret makes just before it becomes cruelty instead. "Get out of my house," Mrs. Kang says, and just like that, it's over. Or so Zara thinks. If you've ever been thrown out of somewhere you depended on, not for love but for survival, then you already know what happens next. Not the anger, not the tears. The math, the horrible immediate math, stay until the end. The morning had started like every other morning in the Kang household, which was to say, it started with tension already threaded through it, invisible and taut as piano wire. Zara had been working in this house for 4 months, long enough to learn its rhythms, long enough to know which floorboards creaked, which light switches needed 2 presses, and which rooms she was supposed to pretend didn't exist, long enough, too, to have noticed things she probably shouldn't have noticed, like how the house had 2 entirely separate registers. The one Mrs. Kang inhabited, all controlled surfaces and sharp edges, and the particular exhausted rage of a woman who suspects everything and can prove nothing, and the one that came alive only when Mr. Kang moved through it. She had tried not to notice that second register. She had tried very hard. Mr. Kang Jae-won, though she had never said his name aloud, not even inside her own head, was not home most mornings. He left before 6, came back after 10, and in between his comings and goings the house breathed differently, looser, more like a house and less like a held breath. On the mornings he was home, everything tightened. This was one of those mornings. Zara had been moving carefully, the way she always moved carefully when he was home, efficiently, unobtrusively, completing each task in the correct sequence. 1st floor, kitchen, dining room, entrance hall. 2nd floor, guest room, study, hallway. 3rd floor, but 3rd floor was Mrs. Kang's domain, and Zara had learned within her first week that you announced yourself before entering anything on the 3rd floor, that you knocked even when you already had permission, that you did not linger. She had knocked. She had said, "Excuse me, Mrs. Kang, I have the pressed shirts." She had waited 3 full seconds before she pushed open the door. She had not expected Mrs. Kang to be standing in the center of the room holding a phone, face twisted with something that was past jealousy and almost indistinguishable from grief. She had not expected Mrs. Kang to look up and see Zara in the doorway and decide, in that half-second of pure unreasoning fury, that Zara was the answer to a question she'd been burning herself alive over for months. You. The word came out like a bullet finding something it had been meant for. "Mrs. Kang, I just brought the... I see how you look at him." Zara went very still. "I'm sorry?" "Don't, Mrs. Kang set the phone down on the dresser. She crossed the room in 4 steps and Zara saw it coming. The raised hand, the rings, the velocity of a woman who has been swallowing something for a long time and still couldn't move fast enough. The slap caught her across the left cheek. The shirt dropped. Zara gripped the doorframe, ears ringing, heat spreading from her cheekbone down her jaw, and she thought, with strange clarity. "I'm not going to cry. Not here. Not in front of her." "Get out of my house," Mrs. Kang said again, quieter now, which was somehow worse. "Take your things. If I see you here in 20 minutes, I'll have you removed." Zara looked at her, really looked at her, the trembling lip, the phone face down on the dresser, the rings that had cost more than Zara made in a year. And she saw it clearly. This woman was not angry at her. She was terrified. She was dismantling the wrong thing because the right thing was too large and too permanent and too tied to her own choices to dismantle. None of that made the cheek hurt less. Zara bent down, picked up the shirt, carefully, precisely, smoothing the fold, and laid it on the dresser beside the phone, because she was not going to leave it on the floor. Not for Mrs. Kang, not for anyone. Then she walked down the hallway to the small room at the back of the house where she kept her things, and she began to pack. She did not encounter Mr. Kang on her way out. She was grateful for that, and angry at herself for being grateful. And neither of those emotions had anywhere useful to go, so she tucked them somewhere tight and kept moving. The house had a service exit through the back kitchen. She used that. Outside, Seoul was already awake and indifferent. Delivery trucks blocking the residential lane. The smell of sesame oil and morning air. A woman 3 buildings over hanging laundry from a window. Zara stood on the pavement with a single rolling suitcase and her work bag slung across her body and her left cheek still burning, and she thought, okay, what now? She had 6 weeks of wages saved, a room in a shared apartment in Mapo-gu, 15 minutes away on the subway, a work visa that was valid for another 8 months, but was tied to household employment, which meant she needed a new position within 30 days, or she'd have to start the clock on departure. She did the math. She was always doing the math. The subway station was a 4-minute walk. She made it in 3. She found a seat in the corner of the train and pressed her fingers to her cheek, still warm, and made herself breathe. Around her, the city moved in its morning patterns. Students in uniforms, office workers with their eyes down on phones, a grandmother with a bag of vegetables balanced on her knee. Nobody looked at her, nobody noticed. She was invisible in the particular way that service workers are invisible, which is to say completely, and always except when something has gone wrong. She pulled out her phone and opened the domestic employment board she used and began to scroll. She would find something. She always found something. She did not let herself think about the second register. The way the house changed. The way she'd sat in the kitchen once at 6:15 in the morning and looked up to find Mr. Kang in the doorway in a dark suit, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, and he'd said, "You start early." And she'd said, "The list is long," and he'd said nothing else, just poured coffee and left, and the whole exchange had lasted 40 seconds, and she had thought about it approximately 1,000 times since. She pressed harder on her cheek. The train rattled underground toward Mapo. She did not think about it. The apartment in Mapo-gu smelled like the 3 other women who shared it. Priya's turmeric-heavy cooking, Sophia's specific brand of vanilla perfume, Adese's incense that she burned in her room, whether the landlord liked it or not, which he didn't. But Adese had opinions about what she did in her own room, and was willing to defend them at length in 2 languages. It was loud and cramped, and the hot water ran out by 8 most mornings, and Zara loved it with a fierceness that surprised her sometimes. She came through the door at 9:40 and found Adese at the kitchen table with a bowl of ogi and her laptop. Adese looked up. Her eyes moved to Zara's face with the speed and precision of someone who notices things for a living. She was training to be a nurse, had the sharpest diagnostic eye of anyone Zara knew. "What happened to your face? Got let go?" "That's not an answer to my question." Zara set her bag down on the chair and opened the cabinet for a glass. "Mrs. Kang had a moment. She hit you. She had a ring on." Zara filled the glass from the tap. "I'm fine. You're not fine. Your cheek is swollen." Adaze was already pushing back from the table. "Sit down, let me look." "Ada, sit down." Zara sat. Adaze pressed cool fingers to her face with clinical gentleness, tilted her chin up toward the window light, made a series of small sounds that could have been professional assessment or personal outrage or both. "No break," she said finally. "But that's going to bruise by tonight. What are you going to do?" "File it," Zara said. "Not with the police before you start, with the agency for record. Then find another placement. You should file it with the police." "And then what?" "She says I was stealing something. She says I was inappropriate with her husband. It becomes a he said she said with a very rich Korean woman on one side and a—" She gestured at herself. Adaze's mouth went flat and tight. "I hate that you're right. So do I." Zara drank her water. "I have 30 days before my visa status gets complicated. I'll file the incident report with the agency today, start applying this afternoon. It'll be fine. You always say that. It's always been true so far." Adaze looked at her for a long moment, not with pity. Zara didn't take pity well, and Adaze knew that, but with something older and steadier than pity. "The Kang name," she said carefully. "That's not a small name in this city." Zara knew that. She had known it from her second week in the house, when she'd found a set of numbers in the kitchen. Not financial records, nothing that explicit, but the kind of shorthand that people use when they're tracking things that aren't supposed to appear anywhere official. She'd closed the notebook and put it back and never touched it again. She'd filed it in the same internal drawer where she kept all the other things she'd seen in that house that she wasn't supposed to see. "I'll be careful," she said. "That's not what I meant." Adaze leaned against the counter. "I meant you walked out of that house today, which is excellent, which was the right thing to do. But people with that kind of name sometimes notice when someone walks away from them. Just keep your head down for a while." Zara nodded, noted. She went to her room and filed the incident report with the agency and started updating her CV, and called her mother in Accra, who asked if she was eating enough, and told her that her cousin, Kwame, was getting married in February, and asked when she was coming home for a visit, and Zara said she didn't know, maybe Christmas, and her mother made a sound that communicated volumes about what she thought of maybe Christmas, and by the time they hung up, Zara felt like herself again. Not better, exactly, but tethered. She went back to the employment board. She applied to 3 positions. She ate the leftover jollof Adaze had made the night before and watched an episode of something she'd seen before so she didn't have to pay attention to it. And by midnight she had convinced herself that the Kang household was behind her. It took 6 days for that to stop being true. On the 6th day, she came back from an interview in Gangnam. 3rd interview, final round, practically certain to be offered the position, and found a man waiting outside the apartment building, not inside, not at the door. Waiting the way professionals wait. Still, unhurried, positioned with a clear sight line to the building's entrance and both approaches to the street. He was in his 40s, with the posture of someone who used to do something physical, and then stopped but kept all the weight and none of the softness. Dark jacket, no expression. When Zara turned onto the street and saw him, he saw her at exactly the same moment. He walked toward her. Every instinct she had said, "Don't run. Running makes things worse." She stopped walking and let him come to her, and she made sure her hands were visible at her sides, and she held herself exactly as she'd taught herself to hold herself in situations where a wrong signal could change everything. He stopped 2 meters away. "Zara Mensah." "That depends," she said, "on who's asking." My employer would like to speak with you. Your employer has a name? The man looked at her steadily. He had the eyes of someone who has learned to find situations funny without finding them harmless. Mr. Kang. Zara's heart did something complicated and fast. She kept her face entirely still. No, she said. The man tilted his head slightly, as if that answer was interesting to him. He's not asking you to return to the household. This is a separate matter. I said no. He thought you might say that. The man reached into his jacket, slowly telegraphing the movement, and produced a plain white card. He held it out. He asked me to give you this, and to tell you that he'll wait until Thursday. Zara did not reach for the card. Wait for what? For you to change your mind. He set the card on the low concrete wall beside them. Good evening, Miss Mensah. He walked away, clean departure, no lingering, no looking back. Zara stood on the pavement and looked at the card on the wall. She left it there and went inside. She took it on her way out the next morning. She didn't know why. She'd made herself a small bargain at midnight. She would not take it. She was not interested. The chapter was closed. And then, at 7:15, she'd walked past it, and something moved in her hand, without permission. And the card was in her pocket, before her conscious mind had fully weighed in. The card had a phone number on one side. On the other, in small, neat script, I owe you an apology that isn't mine to give, but I do owe you something. She read it 4 times on the subway. She tucked it into the inner pocket of her bag, the one with the zip. She went to her interview. She got the job offer by 3 that afternoon, a household in Songbuk-dong. Excellent pay, good references from the agency. She had everything she needed. She typed out her acceptance email and hovered over send. She thought about the way the house had 2 registers. She thought about 40 seconds in a kitchen at 6:15 in the morning, and a man who had said you start early, and looked at her like she was a person, like she was a specific person he had chosen to see. She did not send the email. She called the number on the card. It rang twice. Then, Miss Mensah. His voice was exactly as she remembered it, low, unhurried, with the faint roughness of someone who doesn't waste words and therefore keeps them close. She'd heard it maybe 6 times in 4 months. She could have picked it out of a crowd blindfolded. Mr. Kang, she said, I'm told you have something to say to me. A brief silence. Then, almost quietly, where are you? Somewhere public, she said, very public. I'd like to keep it that way. Another silence. This one felt different, less like withholding and more like reassessing. There's a cafe, he said. In Sedong-gil near the street market, green awning. Tomorrow at 10. I'll be alone. How do I know that? You don't, he said. That's a reasonable thing not to know. Bring whoever you want, she almost laughed. Almost. Tomorrow at 10, she said. She hung up. She sat for a moment in the quiet of her own heartbeat. Then she sent the email to Songbuk-dong, closed her laptop, and went to tell Adeyes that she needed someone to go to a cafe for her with Nur tomorrow morning, and that she would explain on the way. Adeyes, who was studying for an exam, and who had been right about everything she'd said 6 days ago, looked up from her textbook and said, absolutely not. And then, when Zara finished explaining, fine, but I'm carrying the pepper spray. The cafe had a green awning. Of course it did. In Sedong in the morning was all antique dealers and tourists, and the particular unhurried rhythm of a neighborhood that has decided to stay old on purpose. Zara walked its main street beside Adeyes, who was wearing her most severe expression and had the pepper spray in her coat pocket, and had been almost completely silent since they left the apartment, which meant she was nervous, which meant Zara was doing the right thing by having her there. The cafe was small and warm and smelled like roasted barley tea. 3 tables occupied, 1 man behind the counter, 1 man at the table in the far back corner, with his back to the wall and a clear line of sight to the door. Kang Jae-won looked exactly like he had every time she'd glimpsed him in the house. Dark suit, no tie today, his one concession to a Sunday. His hands around a ceramic cup. His face still and watchful, doing that thing it did where it looked like it wasn't doing anything. He watched them walk toward him with an expression she could not name. Zara sat across from him. Aditi sat beside Zara, angled slightly toward the room, and did not bother to pretend she was there for coffee. "Thank you for coming," Mr. Kang said. "You said you'd wait until Thursday," Zara said. "I called on a Wednesday. Don't read too much into it." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. Close enough. "Miss Mensah," he said, "I owe you an apology." "Your note said the apology isn't yours to give. The specific apology isn't. What happened in that house?" He paused, just slightly. "My wife's actions were her own. I can't apologize on her behalf. But you were in my employ, under my roof, and what happened to you there is something I'm responsible for, by extension. And I haven't." Another pause, shorter. "I haven't handled my household well." It was a strange kind of honesty. Not quite an admission, not quite a deflection. She'd expected one or the other. "Why am I here?" she said. He looked at her, really looked at her. And there it was again, that thing she'd filed and refused to think about. That quality of attention that felt like being actually seen rather than assessed. Like he had already assessed her and moved past it to something else. "I have a problem," he said, "and I think you might be uniquely positioned to help me with it." "I'm a housekeeper," Zara said, "not whatever it is you actually need. You're a housekeeper who spent 4 months in my house and never once touched, mentioned, or acknowledged the things she almost certainly saw." The cafe was quiet. The barley tea smell drifted. Adesi's hand moved slightly toward her pocket. "I put things back where I found them," Zara said carefully. "That's good practice in any household." "It is," he said. "It's also rare. And there's something else." He turned his cup slightly in his hands. "My wife accused you of looking at me. She was not entirely wrong, I think. You did look, but not the way she thought." Zara felt something tighten in her chest. She kept her voice level. "I'm not sure I know what you mean." "You looked at the house," he said. "At how it ran, at the patterns. You were figuring something out every day you were there. I watched you do it." He met her eyes. "You were trying to understand what kind of household you were in." The silence stretched. "Most people," he continued, "who figure that out leave. Fast. You stayed. You were professional, and when you left clean. I was fired. Yes. But you didn't make a scene. You didn't take anything. You filed a report with your agency. You kept it contained." He set down his cup. "That's not fear, that's discipline. Those are two different things." Zara studied him. "You've been watching me for 6 days. My people have. Standard precaution when someone leaves the household with knowledge they shouldn't have. And now?" "Now," he said, "I'd like to offer you a job. A real one. With terms that are," he paused, "considerably different from household work." Adesi made a small sound. Zara didn't look at her. "What kind of job?" she said. Not a question. An instruction to tell her precisely. Mr. Kang leaned forward slightly. For the first time, something in him looked not uncertain exactly, but not certain either, like he was making a decision he knew was not the tidiest one he'd ever made. "I need someone inside a household," he said. "Not mine. Someone else's. Someone who moves through domestic spaces without being seen, who notices what others miss, who can be trusted to handle information without breaking." Zara stared at him. "You want me," she said slowly, "to be a spy. I want you to be what you already are," he said, "but deliberately, and compensated for it." Compensated by the Korean Mafia. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He didn't reach for any of the dozen deflections she'd have expected. He just said, "Yes." The barley tea smell, the sound of the street outside. Adeye's very, very still beside her. Zara sat back. "Tell me about the household," she said. The household belonged to a man named Park Sung-min. "Mr. Kang said this the way you say the name of something you've been circling for a long time, carefully, with the particular flatness of controlled feeling. Park Sung-min was 62. He ran an import-export company that had been laundering money through 3 shell subsidiaries for 11 years. He lived in a compound in Yongsan with his second wife, 2 adult stepchildren, a rotating staff of 6, and somewhere in that house, documents that would dismantle an alliance that had been quietly bleeding Mr. Kang's operations from the inside for the better part of 2 years. "The alliance," Zara said. "3 families," Mr. Kang said. "We run parallel structures in this city. There are agreements about territory, about non-interference. Park has been violating those agreements for 24 months. Quietly, carefully, in ways that look like accidents." "What kind of accidents?" "Shipments rerouted, personnel poached. One of my facilities, a storage operation in Incheon, burned down 8 months ago. Fire investigation found a fault in the electrical system." He paused. "The electrician who'd serviced that facility 3 weeks prior was one of Park's contractors. You can't prove it. I can't prove any of it. That's the problem." His hands, she noticed, were entirely still around the cup. But the documents, the actual paper trail of the financial transfers, the contracts, the communication records, those exist. He keeps hard copies, old habit from a generation that doesn't trust servers. And they're in the house. In the house. Adeze spoke for the first time. "Why can't you just send one of your own people in, Mr. Kang looked at her, not unfriendly, measuring. "Park knows my people," he said. "He knows my structures, he knows my organization's demographics. He would recognize anyone I placed in that house within a week." A pause. "Zara, on the other hand, is no one he'd connect to you," Zara said. "More than that. You have a verified work history through a licensed agency. Your records are clean and—" He met her eyes. "Park's household posted a position 4 days ago through the same agency you're registered with. Senior housekeeper, live-in." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. "You planned this," Zara said. "The posting was already there. I noticed the timing. You planned some of it." He didn't deny it. "I identified you as a potential asset several months ago. I hadn't decided whether to approach you. Your departure from my household accelerated the timeline." "Your wife hitting me," Zara said flatly, "accelerated your timeline." Something moved in his expression. Something that was the closest she'd seen him come to looking uncomfortable in his own skin. "Yes. I want to be clear about what you're asking," she said. "You want me to enter a stranger's home under false pretenses, identify and access documents he's keeping private, and deliver them to you, a man who operates outside the law." "Yes. While the job I'd be doing is a real job, with real work, in a household that may have real danger in it." "Yes. And in exchange." He reached into his jacket and placed a folded paper on the table. She unfolded it. The number written inside made her go very still. It was more than she made in 2 years, in one payment, plus a monthly retainer for the duration of the placement. "There's more," he said. "Your visa situation will be resolved permanently. Not just extended, a permanent residency path if you want it. I have channels." "I'm sure you do," she said. "And if anything goes wrong," he said, and his voice changed slightly, dropped to something with more texture, "you have protection. Real protection. Not the kind that makes promises, the kind that shows up." Zara folded the paper back along its original creases. She set it on the table between them. She thought about 30 days on her visa clock. She thought about the employment board and the parade of positions, and the careful, constant math. She thought about the envelope of savings in the back of her underwear drawer. She thought about her mother in Accra, asking when she was coming home. She thought about 40 seconds in a kitchen, a man saying you start early, and the look on his face that she had tried and failed to stop thinking about. She picked up the paper. "I have conditions," she said. Mr. Kang waited. "I communicate only with you, not through intermediaries, not through that man who came to my building." You agreed. "If I determine at any point that the physical risk is beyond what I can manage, I withdraw. No questions, no consequences." He hesitated. "Just barely." Agreed. "If anything happens to me, to anyone in my household," she glanced at Adeyes. "Anyone connected to me, the deal is void, and I go straight to the press with everything I know." "That's a threat. It's a term." He looked at her for a long moment. The cafe made its small sounds around them, then agreed. "One more thing," she said. "Yes. The apology. You said it's not yours to give, but you do owe me something. So say that. Say what you owe me." A different quality of silence. She watched something move behind his eyes. Something that wasn't calculation. That was rawer than calculation. "I owe you," he said slowly. "The acknowledgement that you were treated with cruelty in a house was responsible for, and that I knew my household was unstable, and I placed you in it anyway without adequate consideration for your safety. And I owe you the honesty that this conversation doesn't fix that." It was not a small thing to say. He said it without hedging. "Okay," Zara said. "We have a deal." Adeyes beside her made a sound that combined at least 6 separate emotions into something almost inaudible. Zara felt it. She understood it. She put the folded paper in her bag. On the walk back to the subway, Adeyes was quiet for 4 full minutes. Zara counted. "Say it," Zara said. "You're going to get yourself killed. I'm going to clean a rich man's house and look around." That is the most dangerous sentence I've ever heard you say. "Ada, he's using you." Adeyes stopped, walking. A group of tourists parted around them like water. "You know that, right? Whatever you felt in that house, whatever you think that was, he is using you as an instrument for something that is going to put you in the middle of a war between powerful people who have done very bad things, and you are going to be the most disposable person in that room." Zatra stood on the pavement in the Insadong morning and listened to this carefully, because Adeyes was almost always right and deserved to be heard. "You're not wrong," she said. "Then why?" "Because the alternative is 30 days, Ada." She kept her voice level. 30 days, and I'm either in a new household for less money with fewer protections, or I'm on a plane back to Accra having accomplished nothing. And I have. She stopped. "I have not come this far to have nothing." Adeyes looked at her. The severe expression had changed to something more complicated. "He's also attractive," Adeyes said. "Just noting that, for the record. That has nothing to do with this. It has some things to do with this." "It has some things to do with this," Zara conceded quietly. "But not the decision. The decision is mine, and it's practical." Adeyes was quiet for another moment. Then she linked her arm through Zara's and they walked toward the station. "You call me every day," Adeyes said. "Morning and evening. If I miss 2 check-ins, I'm going to that man directly, and I don't care how many rings are on his people's fingers." "Every day," Zara agreed. "And you eat properly. I don't care what that household eats, you eat. Ada, I'm serious about the eating. I know you are." They went down into the station. The train came. They rode it together in the familiar, rattling dark arms still linked. And Zara stared at the black window across from her and felt the weight of what she'd agreed to settling into her body like something solid. She was going back into the world she'd tried to walk cleanly away from. She did not let herself think about whether that was because of the money, or the visa, or something else entirely. The agency placement moved faster than she expected. The incident report she'd filed had done its work. The agency's records showed a terminated contract with a note about unprofessional conduct by the employer. Clean enough. Park's household manager, a brisk, unsmiling woman named Ms. O, met her at the agency for a 40-minute interview that was more like an inspection. She examined Zara's reference letters with the focus of someone looking for the lie in them. She asked questions about cleaning products and organizational systems and dietary management, and did not ask a single thing about Zara herself. At the end, she said, "We need someone who understands discretion." "I understand discretion," Zara said. "The previous holder of this position." Ms. O paused. "Left under difficult circumstances. We don't discuss household affairs outside the household." "I don't discuss my employer's affairs," Zara said. Period. Miss O looked at her for a moment longer than the question required. "Good. You start Monday." To Sunday night, Zara sat in her room in Mapo and video-called her mother. Her mother was at the market stall she ran with Zara's aunt. They did this sometimes, propped the phone against the cash box while they worked, so she could see the familiar colors of the cloth here, the twi moving around them like weather. Her mother looked healthy. A little tired, she was wearing the yellow head wrap that Zara had bought her 2 birthdays ago. "You sound strange," her mother said, not looking directly at the phone. Sorting something with her hands. "I'm starting a new job tomorrow." "The one you mentioned, Seongbuk?" "A different one. Better pay." Her mother looked at the phone now. Better pay meaning what? Meaning better. She'd send money this week. More than usual. Let that land before the explanations became necessary. "Are you okay? How's the stall?" "The stall is fine. Your aunt is driving me insane because she reorganized the back section again without telling me." A burst of something in twi from off-screen, her aunt presumably defending herself. Her mother made a dismissive sound. "Tell me about this job." "It's a household, Yongsan. Good family, good references." "A good family in Yongsan," her mother repeated, with the particular cadence she used when she was noting something without pressing it. "Mama." "I'm not saying anything. You're saying things with your face." "I'm not saying anything." Her mother smiled very briefly, the one that meant she was letting it go for now and reserving judgment for later. "You call me this week. I'll call you. And eat something, you look thin." Ada says the same thing. Ada is a sensible girl. Her mother picked up whatever she'd been sorting. "Go to sleep, my love. New jobs need rested people." "Good night, Mama." She ended the call and sat in the quiet. She thought, for the first time, about what would happen if this went badly. If Park Sung-min was the kind of man who did not just let things go. If the documents were harder to find than expected, or guarded. Or if someone in that house noticed something wrong in the way she noticed things in the Kang house. She turned off her lamp and lay down and stared at the ceiling and told herself to sleep. She slept. The Park compound in Yongsan was nothing like the Kang house. The Kang house was architectural. All glass and steel and deliberate modernism. The house of someone who wanted you to know exactly how much it had cost to make it look that effortless. The Park compound was older, heavier. It had a wall around it that was not purely decorative, and a gate with a code she was given on arrival and told not to share. And inside the wall, the house sat like something that had decided it wasn't going anywhere. Ms. O met her at the gate. Brief tour kitchen, service corridor, guest rooms, common areas. The family's private wing, off limits without specific instruction, Mr. Park's study, off limits always. The garden, for her use on her time off, which was Sunday afternoon and every other Saturday. Her room was in the staff quarters, small, clean, with a window that looked onto the inner courtyard. Better than the Kang house, actually. More private. She unpacked. She made her bed with military corners. She stood at her window and looked at the courtyard. A persimmon tree, gone autumn bare now, at its center, And she thought, where is it? The study was off limits. That meant the study. It also meant she needed weeks before she went anywhere near it. She needed to become furniture first. She needed to become the housekeeper, completely and without reservation, until the household stopped seeing her and started seeing what she did. She knew how to do this. She had been doing it her whole working life. She went to the kitchen and asked Miss what needed doing before dinner. The first week was just work, and it was work, genuinely hard, genuinely complex work, the kind that people who have never run a household for 6 adults don't understand. The Park house had its own rhythms, its own fault lines. Mr. Park himself she saw only at breakfast and dinner. He was a contained man, late 60s, with the unhurried confidence of someone who hasn't had to rush toward anything in a very long time. He barely looked at the staff. He had the studied non-attention of someone who considers service a feature of architecture rather than a human interaction. His wife, the second Mrs. Park, Kim Hyun-ai, late 40s, lovely and watchful, was different. She watched the staff, not with suspicion exactly, with the assessing quality of a woman who has had to manage things carefully for a long time and trusts no one to do it unsupervised. She spoke to Zara on the 3rd day directly. In the hallway. You're from Ghana? Yes, ma'am. You've been in so long. 4 years. Mrs. Park nodded slowly. Your Korean is good. I've worked hard at it. I can tell. She looked at Zara for a moment, not in Mrs. Kang's way, not with the sharpening edge of jealousy, but with something almost like curiosity. Do you like this city? The question caught her slightly sideways. I do, Zara said. It took me a while, but I do. Mrs. Park nodded again. It takes a while, she agreed. And then she moved on down the hallway, and Zara stood for a moment, feeling the aftershock of being seen by someone in that house as a person. She filed it carefully. Mrs. Park was a variable she hadn't fully accounted for. She'd texted Mr. Kang that evening from the app he'd had her download that encrypted the messages automatically. Week 1. Nothing yet. Mrs. Park is observant. The study is alarmed. I saw the sensor panel from the hallway. His response came in under 2 minutes. Expected. Don't rush. What's your read on the household dynamics? She thought about that for a moment, then typed. He runs everything. She knows it and has accepted it, but she doesn't like it. The stepchildren aren't here. I've heard references to a son in Busan, a daughter studying abroad. Staff dynamics are normal except for the security personnel, 2 on rotation, who are not part of the domestic staff and report directly to Mr. Park. A pause. Then, good. There's a dinner party next Saturday. Regional associates. Park will use it to show the house. Staff will be more visible than usual. Use it. She put the phone away and went to help with the evening clear-up, and did not think about the fact that she had just started reporting on a stranger's household to a man whose voice she thought about more than she should. The dinner party had 22 guests. Zara moved through that evening the way she'd moved through hundreds of professional evenings, efficiently, invisibly, reading the room from its margins. She refilled glasses. She carried plates. She managed the kitchen timing alongside the caterer Ms. O had brought in for the occasion. And she watched. She watched the way Mr. Park greeted his guests. Which ones got a handshake? Which ones got both hands? Which ones got the slight bow that was smaller than protocol, but somehow still felt like more? She watched who leaned toward him and who held themselves back. She watched the man who arrived 20 minutes late. 50s, heavyset, the look of someone who has operated in difficult places for a long time, and who Park immediately steered toward the far corner of the sitting room where they spoke for 11 minutes, with their backs angled away from the room. She watched Mrs. Park watch all of this from across the room with a glass of wine and an expression that had been trained, very carefully, not to tell anyone anything. She was on her way back from the kitchen when she turned a corner and walked directly into something solid. She had just enough presence of mind not to drop the tray. The man she'd walked into was one of the security rotation. Kim Tae-soo. She'd mentally catalogued him on day 2. And he was standing in the corridor, off the service entrance, where there was no real reason for security to be standing unless they were watching the service entrance. "Sorry," she said in Korean. "Excuse me." He looked at her for a beat longer than the apology warranted. His eyes moved to the tray, to her face, back to the tray. "You're the new one," he said, "senior housekeeper. Started Monday. Where were you before this?" She gave him the name of a household she'd listed on her CV, a real position she'd held 2 years ago, unrelated to the Kangs. Mapogu. 2 years, he was quiet, just the extra second of it. "Long way to come for dinner service," he said. Mrs. O needed the hands, another beat. Then he stepped aside and let her pass. She kept her pace even. She got back to the kitchen. She set the tray down and breathed for exactly 3 seconds. Kim Tae-soo was going to be a problem. She didn't know what kind yet. She texted Mr. Kang from the bathroom at 11:15. Security, Kim Tae-soo, was positioned at the service entrance tonight. Asked about my background. Maybe checking. Response: he's Park's former police. Discharge circumstances unclear. I'll look into it. Then, after a pause, "Are you all right?" She stared at those 4 words for longer than made sense. "Yes," she typed. "Go back to whatever you were doing." She put the phone away, retouched her bun in the mirror, and went back out to finish the evening. The second week, she found the study's secondary entrance, not by looking for it, by pattern. She'd been tracking the household's movement rhythms, the way you track anything, by watching what's regular and noticing the thing that breaks from it. Every morning at 7:40, Mr. Park went to his study through the main door. Every morning at 9, Ms. O took tea to the study. Every afternoon at 3, the study was empty for exactly 40 minutes, while Mr. Park took a constitutional in the garden with a phone call. 40 minutes was not enough to search comprehensively, but on her 8th day, she was restocking the linen closet in the east corridor when she noticed the door behind the cleaning supply shelf. Not disguised exactly, but positioned in the way that things positioned between necessities sometimes disappear into the architecture. Service corridor access. Original construction. She could see from the gap under the door that it connected to a room with wood-paneled walls. She did not open it. She photographed the door from her phone through the shelf gap and sent it to Mr. Kang that evening. His response: "That changes the approach. Give me 48 hours, he called the next morning. Not the app, an actual call, which surprised her. "The service corridor runs directly behind the east wall of the study," he said. "There's a panel in the wall. I have the original architectural drawings. Park had the study modified in 2016. "What kind of modification?" "A concealed storage unit. Behind the east wall panel. That's where the documents are." "And the alarm system?" "Motion sensors, door contacts, 1 camera in the main entrance." "Nothing in the secondary corridor. Park didn't file a permit for the modifications. They're not in the security schematic." Zara processed this. "You've had the architectural drawings this whole time?" "Yes." "Then why did you need me to confirm the corridor?" A pause. "Because drawings don't show what's been changed since 2016, and because I needed to know if the corridor was accessible from the inside." She thought about this. "You also needed someone in the house to tell you if anything had changed." "Yes. I'm doing reconnaissance for a much larger plan." "Yes," he said. "Is that a problem?" She thought about the number on the folded paper. "No," she said, "but I want the full picture. All of it." The silence on the line had a quality she was starting to recognize, the pause he took when he was deciding how much to tell her. Park has a meeting in 3 weeks, he said, with the 2 other family heads who are party to the agreement he's been violating. It's a renegotiation meeting. He intends to use the leverage he's built over 24 months to force concessions that would significantly alter the balance of this city. And the documents? The documents prove that the leverage is fraudulent, that what he's calling business failures were sabotage, that the alliance agreement has been violated on his side, not ours. He paused. If those documents come out before that meeting, the other family heads will have reason to revisit their positions. The meeting dies. Park loses the leverage, and you need it out before the meeting, 3 weeks. Zara closed her eyes briefly, opened them. Okay, she said. I need 3 things from you. The exact specifications of that concealed panel. A bypass method for the door contact on the main study entrance in case I need a diversion. And? Tell me more about Kim Tae-soo. Kim Tae-soo had served 11 years in the Seoul Metropolitan Police, Organized Crime Division. He had left, been asked to leave, after an internal investigation found inconsistencies in evidence handling during a major prosecution. Nothing proven. File closed. He'd been working private security for 4 years, the last 2 in Park Sung-min's employ. He understood organized crime operations from the inside. He would know what to look for in a household that had been infiltrated, and he had asked about her background at the dinner party for a reason. She needed to know if he'd followed up on that reason. She got her answer on Thursday of the 2nd week, when Ms. O called her from the kitchen doorway. Mr. Park would like to speak with you. Zara set down the knife she was using for the morning prep. Of course. She followed Ms. O to the sitting room. Mr. Park was in his habitual chair by the window, reading a document. He did not look up immediately. He let her stand there for a moment. A technique she recognized. The practiced dominance of someone who makes other people wait as a habit. Then he set the document down and looked at her. How do you find the household? He said. Very well managed, sir. Miss O runs an excellent operation. Your agency speaks highly of you. He regarded her. You had a position before this. You left under some difficulty, I understand. She kept her face neutral. The circumstances were documented with the agency. My record speaks for itself. Of course. He was quiet for a moment. You're from Ghana? Yes. Have you worked for Korean families before? Several. 4 years of experience in Seoul. He nodded slowly. He had the look of someone who has already decided something and is going through the motions of arriving at it politely. Good. Miss O tells me you're thorough. I appreciate thoroughness. He picked up his document again. That will be all. She went back to the kitchen. She kept her hands steady on the knife, and her face exactly where she'd been keeping it, and she thought, Kim Tae-soo told him about me. Park is noting me. Being noted means I have less time than 3 weeks. She texted Mr. Kang from her room during the lunch break. Park questioned me this morning. Background check triggered. I need to move faster. Response came in 90 seconds. How fast? 10 days. Another pause. Then the panel bypass code is 774-2*. Pull the 3rd molding section from the left at floor level. The latch is magnetic. You'll need 30 minutes minimum inside. She read it twice, then, alone? Your choice, he wrote. But yes, preferably alone. She sat on the edge of her bed in the room, with the window looking onto the bare persimmon tree, and she thought about what she was actually doing, who she was doing it for, what it would mean if Park found out while she was still inside this compound. She thought about her mother in the yellow head wrap. She thought about Mr. Kang saying, I owe you the acknowledgement without hedging. She put the phone away and went back to work. She planned it for a Tuesday. Tuesday because it was the day Ms. O met with the external caterer in the morning, taking her out of the house for 90 minutes. Tuesday because Kim Tae-soo's rotation put him on the exterior perimeter rather than the interior until after noon. Tuesday because she'd observed that Mr. Park's 3 o'clock constitutional ran longest on cold days, and the forecast said 12 degrees. She had learned the service corridor in segments over the course of a week, going a little further each time with legitimate reasons ready. Checking pipework, retrieving a stored item, conducting the kind of low-visibility maintenance that senior housekeepers can reasonably perform in any corridor without suspicion. The Tuesday came. Miss O left at 9:15. Zara watched from the kitchen window. At 9:20, she went into the service corridor with a small kit that contained, along with genuine cleaning supplies, a slim torch, a USB drive, and gloves thin enough to work in. The door behind the shelf opened silently. The corridor beyond was dark and smelled of old wood and dust. Her torch cut a clean line ahead. She counted steps, 12 to the east wall, just as the specifications said. The third molding section from the left. She pressed it with the flat of her palm, felt the magnetic release click, and pulled. The panel swung out. Behind it, a shallow recessed space, maybe 40 centimeters deep, shelved, and on the shelves, 3 archival boxes, labeled in the neat, precise hand of someone who believes in systems, dates, codes, names. She photographed each label first. Then she opened the first box. Financial records, transfers, names she recognized from what Mr. Kang had told her, the shell companies, the routing structures, the dates that aligned with the rerouted shipments, and the Incheon fire. She photographed methodically. Every page. Her hands were steady. She was 22 minutes in, on the second box, when she heard it. Footsteps. Not from the corridor behind her. From the study itself, the main entrance, the door contact. And the footsteps were unhurried and purposeful, moving toward the east wall. She had 4 seconds. She closed the second box, pushed the panel back into its frame, pressed her back against the corridor wall. The torch off. The panel didn't fully close. In the dark, she could hear her own breathing too clearly. The footsteps stopped. There was a long, considering silence from the other side of the wall. Then, they started again, moving away. She waited 5 minutes in the dark, counting her own heartbeat. Then she came back out, went through the corridor, replaced everything precisely as she'd found it, and walked calmly back to the kitchen. She finished the morning prep. She called Mr. Kang from her room on the app at 12:30, hands still faintly shaking. "I have the first box," she said. 47 photographs. A pause. "Are you all right?" Someone came into the study while I was in the wall. The silence that followed was not like his usual silences. It was sharper. Did they see anything? The panel wasn't fully closed when they came in. They stopped. I don't know if they saw it. How long did they stay? I don't know. I couldn't tell from the footsteps. "You need to come out. I need the second and third boxes. Zara." His voice had changed. The flatness was gone, not replaced by panic, but by something with urgency underneath it. "If they saw that panel, the window closes in hours. Come out. If I come out now with half the documents, you have half the leverage. What does that get you?" "It gets you safe." She closed her eyes. The shaking had mostly stopped. "I need 2 more sessions. Give me tomorrow and Thursday." That's too long if they're watching. If they're watching the main entrance to the study. Not the service corridor. I've never gone near the main entrance. He was quiet. "The photographs I sent you," she said. "Are they sufficient for 1 box?" "Yes. The first box alone is significant. It's enough to recontextualize the meeting. Then I come out with 2 boxes worth, and you have what you need." She could hear something in his silence that she couldn't quite identify. Something that wasn't analysis. "Tomorrow," he said finally, "and Thursday is only if tomorrow is clean. If anything feels wrong on Wednesday, you leave." You call me, you leave, I handle the rest. Agreed? And Zara, yes, be careful. She thought about the weight of those two words, the way he said them, not as instruction, not as strategy, as something else. Always, she said, and ended the call. Wednesday was wrong from the moment she woke up. She could not point to it exactly. The house had the same sounds at the same times. The garden gate at 6:15, the kitchen staff arriving at 7, the measured tread of Mr. Park heading to breakfast. But something underneath all of it was different, a frequency shift. The way barometric pressure changes before a storm and the body registers it before the mind does. She texted Mr. Kang at 7:40. Something feels different this morning. Can't specify. His response was immediate. Trust it. Don't go near the corridor today. But she had to know if the panel had been discovered. Not knowing was its own risk. If Park knew about the breach and was waiting, watching, her continued presence in this house was a countdown. If he didn't know, she's a time. She made her rounds. Kitchen, ground floor. She was methodical, unhurried, the picture of a competent professional going about her work. She did not approach the east corridor. At 9:15, she was wiping down the sitting room shelves when she heard voices from the hallway. Two voices, Park and Taesu, speaking low, quickly, in the particular shorthand of people who've had some version of this conversation before. She couldn't make out every word. She made out enough. Her name, not in itself damning. She was staff, her name would come up. But the tone around it, the 2-second pause that came after, the word that followed, that she caught even through the muffled hallway wall, agency. They were checking her agency background, again or more thoroughly than before. She finished the shelf. She moved to the next one. She kept her breathing even, and her expression exactly where it was supposed to be, and she did the math with cold efficiency. If they called the agency and went deeper than the standard reference check, if they found the Kang connection, the terminated contract, the name, it was over, not just the job. The question was how over and what over looked like for Park Sung-min. She had until the agency's office hours ended tonight, maybe less. She went to her room at the lunch break. She called Mr. Kang. He picked up on the first ring. They're checking the agency, she said, deeper than before. I think Taesu has a contact there. If they find the Kang connection, they won't find it, Mr. Kang said. Your file has a firewall. The Kang placement isn't in your public records. How confident are you in that? A pause. 80%. That's not good enough. I know. Silence. I'm going in today, she said. Now during the lunch break. There are 35 minutes where the study's clear. Park takes his calls in the garden on cold days, and it's 9 degrees. I go in, I get what I can, and I come out. That's Taesu is on the exterior this morning. I watched the rotation change at 9. Zara. His voice was doing the thing again, the thing where the flatness receded and something else came through. If this goes wrong, you're in a compound with a gate code. Getting out isn't simple. I know. Tell me you know what that means. She looked at the bare persimmon tree through her window. Its empty branches made precise dark lines against the gray sky, each one exactly where it was supposed to be. It means I need you to be 30 minutes away, she said. Can you be 30 minutes away? The silence this time was only 3 seconds. I can be 15, he said. Something in her chest did something she wasn't going to examine right now. 15, she said. I'm going in at 1 o'clock. She went in at 1:02. The service corridor was the same cold and dark, the shelf, the door, the smell of old wood. She moved faster this time, not recklessly, but with the compressed efficiency of someone who has discarded the version of this plan that included extra margin. The panel, the magnetic latch, the shelves, second box. She picked up where she'd left off. The correspondence files, the contract records, the routing documentation, that established the direct line between Park's orders and the Incheon fire. She photographed everything. The phone's camera was steady in her gloved hands. 31 minutes. She was almost through the second box. The footsteps, when they came, were different from Tuesday's. Faster, more than one person. And they weren't coming from the study. They were coming from the service corridor behind her. She had no time to think. She pushed the panel closed. Fully closed this time, the magnetic latch clicking home, and pressed herself flat against the east wall, torch off, phone in pocket. In the absolute dark, she could hear 2 sets of feet in the corridor, moving toward her position, and she thought, with terrible clarity, they know about the corridor. Tae-soo knew about the corridor. The footsteps stopped 6 feet away. "Nothing here," said a voice she didn't recognize. "Check the panel." Voice, flat, professional. Certain. A beat. Then the sound of someone's hand running along the wall. Zara moved. She went the other direction, deeper into the corridor, away from the voices, back toward the shelf door. And she kept her steps as light as she could on the concrete floor, and she did not run, because running is loud, and loud is over. She moved like she'd been moving through other people's spaces for 4 years, efficiently, without disturbing the air. She got to the shelf door, pushed through it, let it close behind her, the linen closet, normal corridor, normal light. She walked to the kitchen. She put her phone in her apron pocket. She picked up the cloth she'd left on the counter and began wiping the surfaces she'd already wiped. Her heartbeat was enormous. She kept her hands moving. 2 minutes later, Kim Tae-soo walked into the kitchen. He stood in the doorway. He looked at her. She looked back. "Mr. Park would like to see you," he said. The room was very still. "Of course," she said. She set down the cloth. She kept her face exactly where it was. "Should I change first?" A pause. The question had done something, introduced a small uncertainty into his read. If she was afraid, she would not ask about changing. "No," he said. Now, Park Sang-min was in his study. He was standing this time, not sitting. That was the first thing she noticed. The second. There were 2 other men in the room she hadn't seen before. Positioned the way security positions itself when it expects to be useful. Park looked at her with no expression at all. He had the stillness of someone who has been in rooms like this before and on both sides of the equation. "Zara Mensah," he said. "Yes, you're from Ghana. You've worked in Seoul for 4 years. You came to my household from an agency with clean records." He paused. "But before that, there's a gap. 6 days between your last position and your arrival at my gate." "I was between placements," she said. "The agency has my records. I've spoken to the agency." His voice was entirely calm. That was worse than anger. "They have your records, but my associate is very good with records. He found something your file was designed not to show." She said nothing. "The Kang household," Park said. 4 months, ending 3 weeks before you arrived here." The room waited. "I was let go," Zara said. "The circumstances are documented. I'm sure they are." He tilted his head slightly. "What I find interesting, Miss Mensah, is the timing, and the agency, and the fact that Jae-won Kang has been watching my household for some time now. I don't know what Mr. Kang watches, no. But you know what you looked for in my house." His voice was still calm. It was the calmest voice she'd ever heard in a room that felt this dangerous. "In my apron. Give it to Tae-soo." She didn't move. "Miss Mensah." "No," she said. The word landed in the room like a stone, dropped in still water. Park looked at her with something that might, in another context, have been respect, or its near neighbor, the recognition of a worthy opposition. "You have photographs," he said, "on that phone, of things in this room." "I have photographs of the household," she said carefully, "for inventory documentation. Standard practice. We'll look at the inventory documentation in a moment." He gestured to Tae-soo. Tae-soo crossed the room toward her, and that was when her phone rang. Not the app, the actual phone. The ringtone she'd assigned to one number only, loud and specific and impossible to mistake. Everyone in the room heard it. Tae-soo stopped. Park looked at the phone-shaped outline in her apron pocket. "Answer it," Park said, very quietly. She took out the phone. She looked at the screen. Then she looked at Park. She answered it and put it on speaker. "Sung-min." Kang Jae-won's voice came into the room with the same unhurried calm it always had. Only it wasn't addressed to her. "She's in your study right now, I imagine. Which means the photographs are already sent." Park went very still. "They went the moment her phone connected to my network this morning, mister," Kang continued. "Automatic upload. The phone was just a backup." A pause. "So you have two choices. You let her walk out of your gate in the next 10 minutes, and we have a conversation about what happens next, like two people who both understand how this works. Or you don't, and I stop having any reason to keep the next conversation private." The room was absolutely silent. Park looked at the phone in Zara's hand. He looked at Tae-soo. He looked at the two men by the wall. 10 minutes, he said. Zara put the phone in her pocket. She kept her eyes on Park. "Your things," Park said, quickly. She went to her room. She packed in 4 minutes. She'd kept it sparse, kept it packable, because she'd known somewhere in the back of her mind that this moment was possible. She stood at the window for 1 second and looked at the persimmon tree. Then she walked to the gate, entered the code, and walked out. A car was parked on the street. Black, nondescript. Engine running, the back door opened from inside. She got in. He looked exactly as he did in every other context she'd ever seen him. Dark jacket, stillness, the face that gave nothing away, unless you were looking for the right things. But she had been looking for the right things for months, and what she saw now was different. He looked at her face. All of it, quickly, the way you check someone for damage, and then away. "The photographs sent," she said. "Yes, before you went into the corridor." He glanced at her. "The app has automatic sync to a secure drive. Everything you photographed is there. You could have told me that. You didn't ask." She looked out the window as the car moved through Yongsan's afternoon traffic. A pharmacy, a school entrance, a woman walking a small dog with tremendous dignity. "What happens now?" she said. "The documents go to the other two family heads, before the meeting." He paused. Park loses the leverage. The meeting becomes a different kind of meeting, one about consequences, not concessions. And Park himself. "Park will be managed." She turned to look at him. "That's vague." "It's meant to be." He met her eyes. "He won't come after you, I can promise you that, specifically. Whatever else happens is between him and the other families." She believed him. She wasn't entirely sure why she believed him, but she did. "My payment," she said, "in your account by tonight, and the visa." "The application goes in tomorrow." She turned back to the window. The car was heading toward Mapo, toward the apartment, toward Adiese and the smell of turmeric and the hot water that ran out at 8, but was glorious until it did. "Zara." She waited. "Thank you," he said. 2 words. Simple. Not management, not strategy, the kind of thank you that knows what it's thanking someone for. She didn't answer immediately. The car moved through a tunnel, the overhead lights strobing in even intervals. "I want to ask you something," she said. "Yes, the first time you saw me, in the kitchen. 6:15 in the morning," she kept her voice level. "What were you actually thinking?" A pause. "I was thinking," he said slowly, "that you were sitting in my kitchen at 6 in the morning with a list of tasks and a coffee you'd made yourself because you'd figured out where everything was, without being told. And you looked like someone who had been entirely self-sufficient for a very long time and was very good at it and was also..." He stopped. "Also what?" "Tired, but not in the way that breaks people." in the way that's building towards something. The tunnel ended. Light came back. She sat with that for a moment. "What were you thinking?" he said. "I was thinking," she said, "that you saw me, and that I should probably stop noticing that." The car was quiet. "You should know," he said, "that my marriage—" "I know about your marriage," she said. "I lived in your house for 4 months. Then you know I know what it is." She turned to look at him fully. "That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I noticed, and I filed it, and I made a decision about it that I still stand by. What you're doing with it is your own business." He held her gaze. Something moved in his expression that she'd never seen there before. Something that didn't have a strategy behind it. "My own business," he repeated. "Your own business," she confirmed. The car stopped outside her building. She picked up her bag. "Zara." His voice stopped her, hand on the door. "There's something else. A situation developing, not related to Park. One that I could use." "No," she said. "You haven't heard." "I know." She looked at him over her shoulder, and the answer is still no. "I'm going upstairs. I'm going to let my friend tell me she told me so, which she absolutely did. And then I'm going to think about what I do next without anyone else's agenda in it." She paused. "Call me in a week." "A week," he said. 7 days. Count them." She got out of the car. She went into the building without looking back. She made it exactly as far as the 3rd-floor landing before her legs decided they'd been professional long enough, and she sat down on the stairs and put her head in her hands and breathed. The stairwell smelled like someone's dinner, garlic and something sweet, and the fluorescent above her flickered the way it always did, which the landlord had been promising to fix for 6 months. She was alive, she had the money, she had the photographs. She had walked out of a compound on her own 2 feet. She breathed. Then she stood up, smoothed her jacket, walked to the apartment door, and knocked instead of using her key because she needed a daisy to hear her coming. The door opened in 4 seconds. Adaze looked at her, the same clinical efficiency, the same diagnostic speed, and then stepped back to let her in. "You're okay," Adaze said. "A statement, not a question. I'm okay. Sit down. I'm making tea." "Ada, you were right, I told you so. You're incredibly stubborn. The tea is happening." She was already at the kettle. "Did you eat today?" Zara sat down at the kitchen table. The familiar smell of the apartment settled around her. Priya's turmeric, Adaze's incense, the just slightly wrong angle of the chair leg that she kept meaning to fix. "Not much," she admitted. Naturally, the kettle clicked on. "Tell me from the beginning." So she did. She told Adaze all of it. The corridor, the footsteps, the phone call, Park's study, the gate code and the street and the car, and the conversation on the way back. She told it straight through, no editorializing. And Adaze listened with her nursing student attention, which was complete and steady, and didn't flinch at the parts that warranted flinching. When Zara finished, the tea was ready. Adaze set a mug in front of her and sat down across the table. "The money's in your account," she said. "By tonight. The visa tomorrow." Adaze nodded slowly. "And him. I told him to call me in a week." Adaze raised an eyebrow. "And what happens in a week?" Zara wrapped her hands around the mug. The ceramic was almost too hot. She held it anyway. "I don't know yet," she said. That was honest. It was the most honest thing she'd said all day. She had no idea what she would say when he called in 7 days, whether she'd take whatever the next thing was, whether she'd stay in Seoul another year, whether the visa and the money and the whole complicated weight of what had just happened would settle into something she could build on, or something she needed to walk away from. She knew this much. The math had changed. For the first time in 4 years, she wasn't counting days, she wasn't doing the desperate arithmetic of survival. There was margin now. Actual margin. Enough to make a choice that wasn't driven by the clock, That was something. That was not nothing. "Drink your tea," Ade said, "before you think yourself back into a corner." Zara drank her tea. She called her mother 3 days later, not to explain. Her mother would get a version of the story in layers, over time, the way all important things got told. Incrementally, with breathing room between installments. This call was just to hear her voice, to let the sound of Twy in the background do the thing it always did, which was remind her of the specific gravity of the place that made her. "You sound different," her mother said. "Good different or bad different?" A pause. Her mother, considering, "Settled," she said, "like something has been decided." Zara looked out the window of her room at the street below. Delivery bikes, a woman walking fast with her collar up against the cold, a man selling roasted chestnuts from a cart, the smell of which she could almost imagine from 3 floors up. "Something has," she said. "Good." Her mother made a small sound of satisfaction, the one that meant she wasn't going to press. "Your aunt says to tell you the market is having a good season. Also that you should find a good man." Zara laughed. "Genuinely, for the first time in days, tell Auntie Ifua I'm working on it." "Are you?" She thought about a car moving through afternoon light, a voice saying you were building toward something. 7 days on a clock that she'd started herself for once. "Maybe," she said. "In my own way." Her mother made a sound that was warmer than words. On the 7th day, her phone rang. She was in the kitchen. Her kitchen. Mapo, drinking the coffee she'd made herself, because she'd figured out where everything was without being told. And the phone was on the counter, and his name was on the screen, and she looked at it for 2 full rings before she picked it up. "Mr. Kang," she said. "Jaewon," he said. "If you're going to call me in a week, you can call me Jaewon." The kitchen was quiet. Morning light came through the window at its particular autumn angle, all gold and no warmth. "Jaewon," she said, trying the shape of it, finding to her own quiet surprise that it fit. "What's the situation?" "There's a meeting next Tuesday, with the other families. Park will be there, on significantly different terms than he planned." A pause. "I'd like you to be in the room." Not as staff. As, he seemed to consider his words, as someone who should be there. She was quiet. "That's different from what I've been doing," she said. "Yes. Why? Because the people in that room will need to understand what happened," he said. "And you're the one who made it happen." She thought about that. She thought about rooms full of people who had a certain kind of power, and the particular way those rooms changed the air in them, and whether she wanted to be in one of them, and on what terms, and what it would mean to walk in as someone who should be there rather than someone useful to have there. Different things. Important distinction. "And after the meeting," she said, "there will be other situations that need someone with your particular set of abilities." A pause. "But that's a different conversation. This is just Tuesday." "Just Tuesday," she said. "Yes." She stood at her kitchen counter in the morning light and she thought about all the math she'd done. The 30-day visa clock, the savings envelope, the careful calculations of someone who has learned that survival is arithmetic. And she thought about what it felt like to have the math stop being about survival and start being about something else. Something forward-facing. She thought about rooms she could walk into not as furniture but as herself. "Send me the details," she said. "Tonight," he said. And Jaewon. "Yes, I'm not staff," she said. "Whatever this is, I'm not staff." The pause on the line was brief and warm. "No," he said, "you're not." She hung up. She put the phone down on the counter. She drank her coffee, which was good because she made good coffee, and she looked out the window at the street going about its life. Delivery bikes and chestnut carts, and people walking fast against the cold, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Ready. Not for a specific thing, Not for a planned next step in someone else's larger operation. Just ready. The clean, broad sense of being equal to whatever comes next, because she'd already proved to herself that she was. Adaze appeared in the kitchen doorway in her scrubs, thermos in hand on her way to a morning shift. "Who was that?" she said, nodding at the phone. "Tuesday," Zara said, "possibly more." Adaze looked at her for a long moment, the assessing diagnostic look. Then she nodded once, a small, precise nod that contained multitudes. "Eat something before Tuesday," she said. "Don't just have coffee." She was gone before Zara could answer. Zara looked at the empty doorway, then at her coffee, then at the window. She made herself eggs. She walked into the meeting on Tuesday with her shoulders back and her hands easy at her sides, and the particular kind of quiet in her that comes not from having nothing to say, but from knowing exactly what you'll say when the moment calls for it. The room was in a building in Yongu that had the bones of something old and the surface of something carefully maintained. 3 families, 15 people, the kind of room that decided things. Jae-won was already there, at the near end of the table. He looked up when she entered, and she watched, with the same attention she'd always paid, the attention that had made her useful and was now making her something else. She watched something happen in his face. Not surprise. He'd known she was coming. Something steadier than surprise. Something that was about exactly who had just walked into the room. She took the empty chair beside him. Park Sung-min across the table looked at her. He looked at Jae-won, he looked back at her, she met his gaze without expression. He looked away first. The meeting began. She sat in it as herself, not as staff, not as an instrument, not as the person doing the math to survive the room. As Zara Mensah, who had walked into a dangerous house and done an impossible thing and come out the other side with her dignity intact and her account balanced and her options, for once in 4 years, genuinely open. The room decided things. She was part of the deciding. Afterward, in the corridor, Jae-won walked beside her toward the exit. They didn't touch. They didn't have to. The distance between them had the quality of something that knows it's temporary. "That went," he began. "I know how it went," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Is that satisfaction I'm detecting?" She thought about it. The word was a little small. "It's something," she said. The building's lobby opened ahead of them. Through the glass doors, Yongu was going about its afternoon, a city that had never once stopped to consider her, in which she had carved out 4 years of something real anyway, by force of will and discipline, and the particular stubbornness of someone who has always done the work, even when the work wasn't acknowledged. She pushed through the glass door. The city hit her, cold air, garlic smell from somewhere close, the noise of a Wednesday in full swing. She breathed it in. She was still standing here. That had never once been guaranteed. It was everything. If you've stayed until the end, you already know what this story was really about. Not the documents, not the compound, not even the room on Tuesday. It was about the math, the terrible, relentless math of survival that some people have to do every single day. And what happens when, one day, finally, the numbers start adding up in your favor. Share this with someone who's still counting. The night before she went back into the corridor for the second time, she couldn't sleep. Not from fear, or not only from fear. The Mapo apartment was quiet, except for the sound of rain, beginning against the windows, the particular Seoul autumn rain that came in without ceremony and stayed for days. She lay on her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about all the versions of this she hadn't let herself think about during the day, when thinking clearly was more important. She thought about her father. Not often. He'd been gone since she was 11, a cardiac event that arrived without warning on an ordinary Tuesday and, in the years since she'd catalogued her memories of him with the kind of precision she brought to everything important. 17 specific memories, each one clear and bordered, each one something she'd decided to keep. The 17th was the last time she'd seen him properly, standing in the doorway of his shop in the early morning light, checking the lock twice the way he always did. A habit her mother called excessive and Zara had privately called thorough. She was thorough because of him. She knew that. She thought about what he would make of her, lying in a rented room in Seoul at. She checked her phone, 2:17 in the morning, preparing to walk into a wall cavity in a compound belonging to a man who operated at the margins of every law she'd been raised to respect. She thought he would probably have questions. She thought he would listen to her answers with the complete attention he'd given everything she'd ever said to him. And then he would say something she didn't expect, and she would think about it for the rest of her life. She missed him with the clean-shaped grief of someone who has done the work of missing for a long time. She rolled onto her side and picked up her phone. She had one unread message on the encrypted app, from J1, sent at midnight. It said, "The other families have been notified that evidence exists. They're expecting it before the end of the week. Don't feel pressured by that timeline. Your safety matters more than the deadline." She read it twice. Then she typed, "Since when?" His response came in under a minute. "Since I realized I told you the deadline before I told you that." She set the phone on her chest and looked at the ceiling and let herself feel, just for the length of that moment, the complicated thing she'd been filing and refusing to examine. It had a shape now. It was large and warm and somewhat inconvenient, and she did not know what to do with it in the context of her actual life, which was complicated in ways that had nothing to do with feelings, but she let herself feel it briefly in the dark. Then she picked the phone back up and typed, "Get some sleep. I'll have the second box tomorrow." His response, "I'll be 15 minutes away." She put the phone face down on the bedside table, pulled the blanket up, and lay in the rain sound and the dark and thought about being 15 minutes away from someone, and what that meant when you were in the kind of trouble that ordinary life didn't have a category for. She slept at 3:15. She woke at 5:45 with her mind already running the Tuesday plan in sequence, clean and ready. Her father would have understood that too. There was a moment, in the week after everything happened, when she walked into a convenience store near Mapo station at 10 at night to buy ramyeon because Adiezi had eaten the last of the groceries and neither of them had made it to the market, and she stood in the ramen aisle under the fluorescent lights, and the store's tinny speaker was playing something slow and old and Korean that she didn't recognize, and she stood there for a moment longer than she needed to. Just stood there, the ramyeon in her hand, the smell of the store, warm and synthetic and somehow comforting, the sound of rain outside, the ordinary unremarkable nothingness of a Tuesday night in Seoul. She was safe. She was solvent. She had a visa application in process and money in her account, and a friend asleep upstairs who had said "I told you so" with enormous satisfaction, and then made her the best meal she'd eaten in 2 weeks. She was standing in a convenience store, choosing between 2 kinds of ramyeon, which was exactly the kind of problem she was allowed to have. The thing about living in survival mode for a long time is that ordinary safety feels suspicious. Your nervous system doesn't know how to interpret the absence of threat. It keeps sending signals. Are you sure? Are you checking? What are you missing? Because it has been rewarded for those signals for years, and it doesn't yet believe the reward structure has changed. She stood in the ramen aisle and breathed. She put both kinds of ramyeon in her basket. She paid and walked back out into the rain and up the stairs and knocked on the apartment door, and Adiz opened it and looked at the bags and said, "You bought two kinds, I couldn't decide. So, we're having both." Daisy made a sound of approval, and stepped back, and Zara came in out of the rain, and the apartment was warm and smelled like incense and turmeric and all of the specific living of three women building something real in a city that hadn't exactly asked for them. And Zara set the bags on the counter and felt, underneath the tired and the complicated and the unresolved, something that it took her a moment to name. She named it home. Not permanent, not unconditional, not finished, but home. The functional, hard-won kind. That was worth more than she'd known when she was counting days. The Tuesday meeting changed things, and not just in the ways she'd expected. She had expected the power shift. The way Park sat differently at that table than he had intended to, the documents reframing everything he'd claimed. She had expected the careful formal language that powerful men use when they're acknowledging defeat without quite naming it. She had expected to feel something when that happened, some version of satisfaction. She hadn't expected to watch Jaewon across the table and see for the first time the cost. Not regret. He was not a man who operated from regret, and she'd understood that early. But something adjacent to it, the particular weight of someone who has spent a long time being effective at something that requires them to be a certain kind of person, and who sometimes looks at the person they've had to be and finds it not wrong exactly, but not enough. She recognized that look. She'd worn it herself. After the meeting, when the others had filed out and it was just the two of them in the room, with its old bones and its carefully maintained surfaces, she said, "What happens to you now?" He looked up from the papers he was gathering. "I mean in general," she said. "Not today. What are you building? What does the end of this look like for you?" He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then, "I've been asking myself that for about 18 months. And I don't have a clean answer yet." He set the papers down. "What about you?" She thought about the ramyeon aisle, the warm apartment, her mother's voice on Sundays, the visa application, the empty mornings that were beginning to feel like possibility rather than risk. "I think," she said slowly, "that I want to build something, not for someone else, something mine." She looked at the window, the city outside it. "I don't know exactly what yet, but I know what it feels like to have no margin, and I know what it felt like to sit in that room today as someone who had earned a chair at the table. And I want more of the second thing, on my own terms." He looked at her, that quality of attention that had started everything, the specific act of being actually seen. "You will," he said, simply. No decoration. It was the most useful thing anyone had said to her in a long time. She picked up her bag. "Call me when the next situation is worth calling about." How will I know if it's worth it? She thought about this, about all the things she'd learned to evaluate. Risk, leverage, timing, the difference between what's being offered and what's actually being asked. All the skills she'd built in other people's spaces. All the things she'd learned to see clearly because she'd had to. "You'll know," she said, "because you'll ask yourself whether it's something I'd say yes to, and you'll be honest about the answer." He almost smiled. The real version. The one she'd seen exactly once before and wasn't sure she was supposed to have seen. "That's a high bar," he said. "It's the right bar." She walked out. The city was still going. It always was. And somewhere in the distance, across the river, the lights were coming on as evening came down over Seoul. Thousands of them, each one a window, each one a person, with their own arithmetic, their own count of days, their own version of the math that survival requires. She walked into it, unhurried, her bag on her shoulder, her head up. She had started it. Whatever came next, she had started it. That was enough. That was, for right now, exactly enough.